So in continuing our talk here with Title I, there are some definite issues with Title I and things that every reauthorization of the ESEA tries to improve upon. So one of the main issues at this point, this is prior to ESSA, the new reauthorization done that was completed or enacted in 2015. The first issue is that we cannot combine federal and state dollars to enhance the same program. So, for instance, in Indiana, if we're using state dollars to fund state voucher programs, then we can't also use federal dollars to help fund that. So those funds have to be separate. And then another major issue is that research shows that there's really no ROI or return on investment. That's a business term that we've stolen from the business sector. Businesses cut funding in various areas that show no growth or no data. Business is very much driven by data. They make a very common term in the business world is data-driven decision making. And if there's no data to support something or there's no return on the original investment, so we invest funding in something or we invest money somewhere, and if there's no profitable return, then we cut those funds. And so that's something that the education world has really moved to in the last several years, especially since No Child Left Behind. We've really moved to this looking at the return on the investment. Is the funding that we're spending in Title I actually improving educational outcomes with students? Have literacy and mathematics scores or achievement grown substantially to the point that we can say that there's a positive return on investment? And at this point, there's not a lot of research showing that. But again, things like this take years. It's one problem in the education setting that's not comparable to the business world is that when we change programs or we enact new policies, it takes many years to see the results of that. So it's not just something that we can look at quarter by quarter or fiscal year by fiscal year. We have to wait for long-term impact. Um, Secondly, there's a rigid distribution requirement. So anyone that knows math knows that if you have a large population and 25% of a large population is going to be a lot much larger number of students impacted than say 25% of a very small population. And that's right now, that is what they look at. So you might have 1,000 um, low SES students in a high school that serves 5,000 students. Um, but that's not 25% of your student body. So you may not receive Title I funds, whereas a small school that, and I can't do the math really quickly in my head, but a small school might only have 50 students and they're going to receive Title I funds. So that's not any school that has 1,000 low SES students should be receiving Title I funds, but that's not how it's set up. It's all based on percentages. So that is in itself is an issue. Okay, so the next slide. All right, so subplant statute leads to pull-out programs instead of in-class programs. So it's difficult to show if you're um, supplementing your academic programs. It's really hard to show that when the students stay in a gen ed classroom. So when they stay in the regular classroom, it looks like we're just administering services to the whole student body and not just to those that need it. So we end up having a lot of pull-out programs, and there's a lot of debate about when students are pulled out of the general ed classroom, they're actually missing the curriculum. They're missing the content that's being delivered. And is that a good thing? So that's a real problem. And then it's hard to implement comprehensive programs because there's overlap. There's lots of overlap in education. We can't just apply, let's say we have a special needs child who has certain issues because of their disability, but they also weren't read to as a child. So their literacy skills are lacking for the mere simple reason that nobody read to them, and now they're in kindergarten and we've got this child that can't read and has no literacy skills. But that may have nothing to do with the student's disability. So it's really hard to implement these programs for students, because is that something that they need because of an IEP, or is that something that they need because they just weren't read to as children, and they're lacking those skills? So there's a lot of overlap with the issues that students need, and students are very complex, and learning is very complex. So having those overlap issues can be a real problem. And then there's a burden of funding accountability. So much time and effort is spent on dotting the I's and crossing the T's and filling out all the bureaucratic paperwork that goes along with Title I funds, or any of the ESEA funds. So, they have to hire, or school districts have to hire teams of people to keep track of all this data, which can become very expensive. Okay, so more titles. Title II is designed to promote literacy. This is actually in the original ESEA, this was called Title II. However, now it's been rolled into Title I, because anything to do with literacy is now considered Title I. So adding school libraries, purchasing new textbooks, other print and media-driven instructional materials. Now what we do is we prepare, recruit, and retain high-quality teachers and principals, and that's what Title II is now. It's the preparing, recruiting, and retaining of high-quality teachers and principals. So, and that's been in place since that change, and the now Title II has been in place since No Child Left Behind. Okay, so Title II funds. Obviously, this was the new Title II, which is the retention and training and hiring of qualified teachers. A lot of times we'll hear this as highly qualified status, but it also has a lot to do with teacher retention, which is why a lot of schools now have first year mentoring programs and different things like that. So here's the breakdown of funds that are spent annually, or well, this was in fiscal year or school year 2013-2014. $2.13 billion were appropriated for Title II funds, and you can see all of the different activities or areas that those funds went to. So take a look at that for a second. Okay, Title III, it promotes educational innovation. At the time, it was the first of its kind. No money was really devoted to this in education. And the money was provided for was to supplement education centers. So to provide any kind of educational innovation. Back when this first came about, it would have been getting, movie projectors in the classroom. In the 80s, when I was in school, it would have been adding computers to the classroom. So it's much, much different than what it is now. Now that is not even one of the title funds. But now what we see as Title III is called language instruction for limited English proficient and immigrant students. So it's our ENL programs, and that has been in place since No Child Left Behind. The budget for fiscal year 2015 was $737 million accounted, or went out across the nation as federal dollars to support ENL students. And so with that comes a lot of accountability, specific standards for students that are ENL students, and instructional supplementation. So adding ENL teachers or resources, buying textbooks that are bilingual or written in another language. So all of this comes out of Title III funds. Oops, sorry, I flipped slides there. So looking at Title IV, it was designed to advance education based on data. So this is that data-driven decision making that I was talking about that's used so much in the business world. So with this title came research from the higher ed arena, as well as federal and state organizations, whatever those organizations might have been at the time. And then training, both state training and local training. Based on looking at your data and making instructional decisions based on that data. So that's been around for some time. However, it wasn't implemented to a great or a large extent with classroom teachers until No Child Left Behind came about. So administrators, district administrators, building administrators would have looked at data, but not a lot kind of filtered down to classroom teachers, like I said, until 2001 when No Child Left Behind came about. And so now Title IV is known as the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. And that basically means that they provide academic enrichment, a broad array of services and programs. So, preventative services, arts impact in education, um, different things that promote 21st century community building skills are part of this Title IV at this point. Okay, Title V is designed to strengthen state departments of education. So it really helps set up and define roles for the federal, state, and local control. It set up also gifted programs, foreign language, PE, the arts, mental health care for students. And now it's known as the Informed Parental Choice and Innovative Programs is what Title V is. So setting up magnet programs, small learning communities within schools, things of that nature. Title VI was designed to provide assistance for handicapped children. It was not in the 1965 version, but it was added in 1966. Now we don't have Title VI as we knew it. It's now known as the Flexibility and Accountability title, and that's where we really focus on all the standards that are within schools, so curriculum being based on standards as well as assessment, classroom assessment, more standardized assessments and things like that. Title VII, it was designed to provide bilingual education, that's hard to say, originally. And again, that wasn't in 65, but it was added in 67, and it's now known as the Indian, Native Hawaiian, and Alaska Native Education title. Okay, so let's look at a few of the kind of landmark acts that came about in education more recently. So in 1994, President Bill Clinton that was the administration at the time. It was the creation of the current Title I that we see now. So this is the Title I. When I in the previous slides, when I said this is what Title I looked like and this what it is now, that came about as of 94 with the IASA. Also, one of his big messages that was promoted through the IASA was the safe and drug-free schools. Um, Drugs really became a problem during this time. They were definitely a problem in the 80s as well. Not a lot was done to prevent drugs within schools, as well as gun violence within schools. So when Bill Clinton came into office, that was just something that he felt was very important, and his administration pushed that within the IASA. There was also these Eisenhower grants that were dispersed as part of the IASA that provided professional development for teachers in districts, and so districts would apply for these grants. And I worked in a school that still got Eisenhower funds even in as late as 99 when I started teaching in early 2000s. So the Eisenhower PD funds were there for some time. There was a major increase in bilingual funding. There was also impact aid and educational technology as a result of the IASA. And I should note that impact aid was given as almost like just a free pot of money for schools to use as they needed. This money could have been used, say, that you had a student come in with severe disabilities that required thousands and thousands of dollars. And we all saw when I went over earlier how school funding works, that schools do not get tons of money to help students with special needs. So say that a student came in and needed a interpreter in the classroom. Maybe a deaf student came and you had needed an interpreter that was going to cost $50,000 a year. Obviously, the funding from the state level, the local level, didn't support that. So you could use this impact aid to kind of supplement the money needed to assist that student. So each state kind of has its own regulations regarding impact aid, but for the in most cases, the federal government kind of saw this as, something happened this year, you didn't have the money set aside, or you didn't have the money in your budget for it, so you can use impact aid to help out in that situation. So that's sort of how impact aid works. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and I will conclude this lecture in the next video.